Wasabi guys, welcome back to another 10 cards for Commander that you should totally go and pick up right now while they're cheap. I tend to, for these videos, stick with relatively newer cards within a year of each other, because that's, in my opinion, the best time to take advantage of pricing, is when a card is still new and hasn't really found its home yet. Once it finds its home in Modern or Commander, Legacy, something, then it starts to go up in price. Not saying that any of these are going to be Legacy staples or Modern staples, but at least for Commander purposes, I think they're all brilliant cards that you should totally pick up, again, while they're pretty cheap. But before I get into the video, first I would like to remind you that most of you who are watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. So I would really appreciate it if you did me the favor of hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. First card I want to talk about here is from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, Olaf Fiddlebender. Only $1.40. Back in my top 10 for Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, I had this ranked up pretty high, and for a good reason. It's essentially birthing pod for artifacts. Now keep in mind $1.40 is for this specific printing. Don't ask me why. It can sometimes be a little bit different for the cardboard or the card art, so take that into account when you're looking to pick some of these up. I think Oswald's going to be a pretty good card for years to come. It's going to age incredibly well, and some of these rares from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms are still pretty cheap. This is one I think is definitely worth holding on to for Commander decks if you're playing white in any sort of artifact deck. The next card here is from Modern Horizons 2, Timeless Dragon. This is sort of a newer, updated version of another card, Eternal Dragon. Also has plane cycling of 2, but has the Eternalize ability added onto it. So once you use it for its plane cycling, you get your planes. You can always bring it back from the graveyard. Granted, not the card itself, you get a token after exiling it, which I still think is great value. If you're playing white, one of the biggest concerns in white is getting to your lands, getting to your planes. It's always nice if you have a card that says, hey, if you miss your land drop, why don't you go search it up? And for only 24 cents, this is a very underrated card already. I understand a lot of cards that are cheap, they're cheap for a reason. This is cheap in a way that I don't really think it's going to get much cheaper. So it's a good card to pick up if you're interested in adding it to a mono white deck. Very low risk involved here. And then we have Svalin of Sea and Sky. The 3-mana blue merfolk cod. This is a mythic, and for only $1.87. I was almost certain that this is going to go up even higher. Has indestructible as long as you control at least 2 other merfolk, and whenever she attacks, you draw a card. Other merfolk you control have Ward 1, so you do have a little line of protection there, but great for tribal decks, not just merfolk, but if you're looking to play a changeling deck, this is also good to protect your other changelings because they'll be considered merfolk. An indestructible merfolk I think is a problem for a lot of decks, so $1.87 for a mythic from this set in particular, I would totally buy it if you need it for a merfolk deck. The next card here is Asmodeus the Archfiend. Only 51 cents, and I said it before, this is the best card from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms if you're looking to play Commander. It is essentially a weaker Griselbrand, but a weaker Griselbrand is still going to be incredibly powerful. You do have to pay 3 black to draw 7 cards, and those 7 cards get exiled, and you have to pay a black to return them all to your hand. But doing that all at once, it's so easy in Commander to spend a little bit of mana to get a ton of card advantage, and then go off. For a lot of the same reasons why people absolutely feared Griselbrand. Asmodeus the Archfiend is totally going to be a card worth fearing. I just don't think people have considered it for as many of their black decks yet. The next card here is Chef's Kiss, a 3-mana red instant from Modern Horizons 2. You gain control of target spell that targets only a single permanent or player, and then you copy it. Then reselect the targets at random for the spell and the copy. The new targets can't be you or a permanent you control. That right there is incredibly underrated, and for only 19 cents, it's also quite chaotic. There are a lot of copy spells in red. There are a lot of ways to copy your opponent's spells, redirect them, change the targets. This lets you do both, so you get to gain control of the spell and reselect its target randomly, and then you get to copy it and randomly select a target for that one as well. Red lacks precision, but in this case, when you're not really in danger of having anything of your own targeted, it's a pretty low risk play with a high ceiling. The next card here is yet another mythic from Modern Horizons 2, Thrasta Tempests Roar. This 12-mana dinosaur with pretty good cost reduction is something I think is going to age pretty well for only $1.06. Considering that we could always receive more dinosaur support in the future, I think what we have here is a pretty powerful one that becomes 3 cheaper for each other spell that you've cast this turn. So you're rewarded if you're having a big turn by only really having to pay a couple green mana. Trample, haste, and brand new wording here. Trample over planeswalkers. So the creature deals excess combat damage to the controller of the planeswalker it's attacking. So this is something that's never been done before. Like if you hit a planeswalker, you're just hitting that planeswalker. If the 7 power here is more than their loyalty, the controller of it is dealt the excess damage. And it has hexproof as long as it entered the battlefield this turn, so you pretty much have a free turn to swing in with it without the fear of targeting removal. It has a lot going on here for only $1.06. I think it's kind of a steal right now. And then we have Vanishing Verse from Strixhaven. Speaking of targeting removal, this is a very good one. Probably the best one to come out all year. White and black, only 2 mana, instant speed to exile target monocolored permanent. Spoiler alert, that's going to be most of the cards on the field. And while this doesn't deal with multicolored problems, that's sort of the trade-off with a lot of good targeting removal, is that you're not able to deal with certain things. The cheaper that you go with your mana, that tends to be the case. But for only $1.68, this is something that is going to be an auto-include for a lot of decks in the same way that Anguished Unmaking is. Exiling removal is some of the best removal that you can come across in the game, so no doubt in my mind this is going to go up in the future. The next one we have here is another Mythic from Modern Horizons 2, Dakin Shadow Slayer. Only $1.89, I really think this card is underrated for what it does. Everything here is useful in Commander. It enters with an insane number of loyalty counters because it enters equal to the number of lands you control, which is most likely going to be 3 or more, and while Dakin doesn't have the best ult, it's still a very practical ult that will either act as a way to cheat into play a big artifact, or bring something back from your graveyard to the battlefield. The -3 is great exiling removal, and Surveil is basically a graveyard scry. No doubt in my mind, I think Dakin deserves to be in a lot of decks. It's kind of like with Asmodeus the Archfiend, it's so powerful, I don't think enough people have considered putting it into their decks yet. And the next card we have here is another Mythic, but this is from Strixhaven, Tanazir Kwondrex. Only $2.25 for this Elder Dragon. All of the other Elder Dragons are a bit more pricey, and while Tanazir doesn't do anything brand new, it is a very flashy card to have in blue and green. It is a way to win. Whenever it attacks, you may have the base power and toughness of other creatures you control become equal to Tanazir's power and toughness until end of turn. And when it enters, you double the number of +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. So a ton of ways to abuse this kind of card, and no doubt if you can make Tanazir's power and toughness even greater, it's going to abuse things like smaller tokens. Anything like that, if you can make something like a Mana Dork suddenly more viable in combat, you've really helped your board presence. Definitely something I could see going up in the future because of its potential in combat to help you win games pretty easily. And the last card we have here is from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, Orcas, Prince of Undeath. Another card I had pretty high up on my top 10 Adventures in the Forgotten Realms list. This is another example of a card that I think is incredibly powerful that deserves to be in a lot of these black and red decks. It's just I don't think a lot of people have considered it yet. You have Graveyard Reanimation for your creatures with one of these modes. If you choose to dump a lot into X, you get to bring back X target creature cards with total mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield and give them haste, so they can use their activated abilities, they can attack immediately, or you can choose the other mode, each other creature gets -X/-X, and you lose X life. So either way you're solving a problem. You're recovering late game with that second mode, or you're removing all other creatures with that first mode. And -X/-X is definitely worth it, even for the life loss. Just another card from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms that I think is incredibly undervalued. But anyway, let me know what you think about these 10 Commander pickups. Void here signing off, I will see you all next time.